Good morning. I hope everybody was able to enjoy Christmas this week. Our text for this morning is Luke chapter 2. And this is a story that I imagine many, if not all of us, are familiar with. Luke says this: "In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling cloths, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn." It's important to know, I think, that Luke doesn't record this story just for posterity. He doesn't record this just because maybe it would be nice to have a few details about the birth of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, and John do not record this bit. They don't talk about the census. They don't give us the bit about the manger or the inn. Only Luke does that. And I think the reason he does that is because he sees in all of these details something that's useful for the church in our formation in the image of Jesus. He sees a spiritual significance to the details of this story. I think he wants us to know that we need to know how Jesus came into the world, because we need to know how Jesus comes into the world. And so as I've been thinking about this story for the last several weeks, and Christmas is always the hardest sermon to preach for me because you guys have heard the story. What can you possibly say? But as I've been thinking about it, thinking, what am I going to say? 3 words have come to mind. And so I want to share these 3 words with you, and then I'll sit down. The first word that comes to mind is the word unprepared. Now, I don't mean to say that Joseph and Mary were totally unprepared. They had plenty of warning, several months of warning. Certainly by this point, she is starting to show. She has known ever since the angel appeared to her, and Joseph has known ever since the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to him. They knew this was coming, and I imagine that back home in Nazareth, there is a cradle somewhere that has Jesus' name on it. And Mary knows what room she is going to give birth in. She knows. They have their stockpile of diapers. She's had the baby shower. They know. They're prepared. But then this news comes that they are going to have to make the journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem for this census. And I think that probably throws a wrench into their plans, because they know the time is coming close. They don't have calculated, gestational ages based on the last date of the menstrual period or whatever. They know the time is coming close. Now, it's roughly 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem. They're going on foot, unless Mary is riding on some sort of animal. The text doesn't say that, but we like to imagine that she is. Now, 90 miles takes how long to travel on foot? Maybe 4 days to a week, something like that. If they're really, I almost said busting a move, but that means dancing. If they're just really making progress. So I imagine that the hope is that they're going to make this trip as fast as they can down to Bethlehem, register for the census, and then turn around and hoof it back to Bethlehem back to Nazareth as fast as they can, so that she can give birth in the room that she's planned to, and then put him in the cradle that has his name on it. That's where Mom and Dad are. That's where Mary's sisters are. That's where her aunts are. That maybe she even has a midwife lined up. But while they're on the road, the time comes. And 90 miles from home might as well be 1,000 miles from home, because she doesn't know anybody in Bethlehem. She doesn't have her family. She doesn't have help. She just has Joe, which is not real promising. But none of that matters now, because there's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to stall. This baby is coming, and he is coming now. So what was that like? I imagine that Mary and Joseph were hoping for just a little bit more time. They're just thinking, no, not now, not today. We just need a few more days so we can get back home. Or even just tomorrow, we were going to register in the morning and then we were going to turn around and start heading back, and we would be passing through Jerusalem tomorrow. And Jerusalem is a big city and there's more resources, and that would be a fine place. Just not today, not yet. That suddenness, that truncation of their timeline surely created desperation for them. They approached the village hoping to find a couple of warm beds and a continental breakfast would be really nice. But instead, their standards are significantly dropped because now they just need to find a roof, a hole in the wall, anywhere. Just out of the way, out of prying eyes, just around the corner, somewhere, anywhere for the night. And that's why the first word that comes to mind for me is the word unprepared. That's how it's going to be when he returns, It'll be sudden and unexpected, even though we know it's coming. Like, we believe he's coming, and we read about it, we sing about it. But Christmas reminds me that for as much preparation as we may do for his return, he is still going to come like a thief in the night, and he's going to come when we least expect. And so may that day not find us unprepared. Jesus tells us to watch and to stay awake and to be ready because the day is coming. And we need to be ready like the ladies who are waiting for the bridegroom and they have to ration out their oil. Jesus tells us this story. When he comes, there will be some among us who will wish that, no, not yet. Just a little bit more time. Come tomorrow. I've just got so much going on right now. And what it is we've just been distracted and preoccupied by the cares of life. But he is coming, whether we're ready or not. The second word that comes to mind when I read this story is the word unreceptive. The time is now. This baby is coming whether you're ready or not. And so Joseph begins to just frantically look anywhere for somewhere that Mary can bring this baby into the world, and yet door after door is shut in his face. Now, why is that? We can speculate. We could guess. Maybe this has something to do with the census. There are people coming from all over to Bethlehem to register for this census, and so maybe it's kind of like Fibark, just all the hotels are booked full, and there's just nowhere for them to stay. Bethlehem's not a very large place, so maybe there's not a whole lot of choices to begin with. But maybe that's it. I don't really believe that, though, because if there are 200 or 300 people in Bethlehem, and there's not one person who is willing to give up their bed to a young mother in labor, I don't know. The virgin birth is one thing, but that sounds really far-fetched. That was supposed to be funny. Nobody thought that was funny. Maybe this is a shame thing. Because the ancient Near East is much more like Korea or Japan or China when it comes to honor and shame than the United States is. And so for a young, unwed woman to be pregnant, well, that brings shame on her family. And perhaps to extend hospitality to her, to receive her into your space would bring shame on you and your family. And so nobody wants to do that. They're looking out for their own. Maybe that's the case. Maybe the inn, which the word inn at the very end of verse 7 is the word kataluma in Greek. Maybe the kataluma is like a guest room, as some have suggested that. And so Joseph has a great uncle in Bethlehem, and he's hoping that when they get there, they'll be able to stay in Uncle Mordecai's kataluma, his guest room. But when they get there, they find there's already somebody there, so there's no room for them. But whatever the case, somehow, at least for me, but maybe for you too, we get this image in our mind that some kind soul finally takes pity on them and says, I don't have a kataluma available, but I do have a stable that you can use. I do have a barn that you can use. But the text doesn't say anything about a stable, does it? It says that Jesus is placed into a manger, so after she's given birth, there's somewhere for her to put him, but it doesn't say where she gives birth. For all we know, she gives birth outside, in an alley somewhere, under an overpass, or in a stairwell. The thing is, when we focus on why there was no room for Jesus, whether it was overcrowded or it's about shame and honor or whatever, I think we wind up missing Luke's point. Because Luke's point is that there was no room for Jesus. There's nowhere for Jesus to come into the world. There is no open space for him. The Gospel of John actually says something really similar to this point in chapter 1. In verse 9 it says, "The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him." So maybe this isn't so much about overcrowdedness or shame. Maybe this is about Jesus and how the world never has room for Jesus. When Jesus came into the world, he didn't find a room prepared for him, although he has gone to prepare a room for us. He didn't find a warm meal waiting for him on the stove. He didn't find so much as a porch light waiting for him. But he came anyway. He inserted himself where he wasn't welcome, and thank God he did. The question is whether it's going to be any different when he returns. When he comes, will he find faith on earth? Jesus says that. Will people be waiting for him? Will he find us waiting for him? Or will he find that we've been so preoccupied and distracted that we don't even notice that he's coming? The third word that comes to mind when I read the story is the word unassuming. Unassuming is a word that I would use for Yoda. If you remember in The Empire Strikes Back, 1980, Donnie knows what I'm talking about. We meet Yoda on Dagobah. Luke Skywalker crashes into the swamp, right? And he meets this odd little green furry creature that talks all funny. But he's a Jedi master. He's this legendary figure who is wrapped in unimpressive packaging. He's unassuming. That right there is the birth of Jesus. This legendary creature. Well, creature, I shouldn't say that. That's heresy. This legendary figure wrapped in unimpressive packaging. He is born off the beaten path in the remote village of Bethlehem, born in obscurity in the dark in an alley under an overpass. Nobody even notices that he came. Nobody cares that he came. Nobody knew his name. He comes into the world alone, and his tiny little cries are just absorbed into the endless night sky. And for most people, the sun came up the next day, and you wouldn't know that anything was different. Like nothing had even happened. Just another idle Thursday. But around the corner, in some dark little nook in this remote village of Bethlehem, something monumental had happened. The world had changed. This tiny little human is the one that all of creation was looking for and waiting for, that all of history had been anticipating, and the one that all of history since has been shaped by. This child is wisdom itself now become human. This is the one through whom all creatures come into existence and through whom all creatures have their being. One of the most significant events in the history of creation. This moment means everything, but you would never know by looking at him. But make no mistake, when he returns, it's not going to be like that. He's not going to slip in silently in the night and nobody even knows. When he comes back, it's going to be with glory and trumpets and grandeur and fanfare. The scriptures tell us that on that day, every knee will bow in heaven and on earth and even in the grave, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. Amen. Not everyone is going to like it. I mean, some people are going to try to hide behind rocks and in caves and holes in the ground, and some are going to say, no, not yet. Come back tomorrow, because I got something going on, but nobody is going to miss it. Nobody's going to say, what? Nobody's going to find out on the news the next day. Nobody's going to miss it. Because he may have come in obscurity the first time, but next time he will come as judge and as king. When Jesus came into the world, he caught the world off guard and unprepared. He came into a world that was unreceptive to him and that had no room for a man like that. He came with no red carpet and no limousine and no royal carriage. The world rejected him and cast him aside and didn't even recognize him. And he knew that all of that was going to happen. But he still came. And that's good news. That is good news for people like us. He inserted himself anyway. He did not wait for us to be receptive and ready, because if he did, Lord knows he would still be waiting. But he broke into our world, and thank God he did. This is the kind of God that we worship. One who breaks into an unsuspecting and unprepared world in order to save them. One whose kingdom begins small, like a mustard seed, which is the smallest of all garden seeds, but when it grows up becomes the mightiest of all the garden plants. We worship a God who comes to us personally when we are not ready for it. He intrudes into our lives with his grace when we were not even looking for him. We were just humming along, doing whatever it is we were doing on some idle Tuesday when someone invited us to that first Bible study or walked into our office or however it happened to you. And you weren't necessarily receptive to him at first. He didn't find a space in your life that was all cleaned up and ready for him with the porch light on and a warm meal waiting. He had to make room in his life, in your life, for him. And thank God he did. When he came into your life, it seemed small and unimportant at first. Maybe a pleasant addition, but nothing earth-shattering. But over time, that little seed grew, and even now it continues to grow. He came. He knew, and he came anyway. Thanks be to God. Let's pray. Jesus, you knew. You knew that we were not going to be ready for you. You knew that we were not going to be receptive to you. We knew that we weren't even going to recognize you or how important you were. But you came anyway. And we are eternally grateful for that. We know that you have taken on flesh, that you did not just enter flesh, but that you became human. God, we are so thankful. And I pray that your presence would continue to be with us. I pray that you would break into our lives again. And again and again, with fresh grace and mercy. I pray that your Spirit would be poured out on us anew as he would lead us into all truth. Lord, make us more like your Son Jesus by the power of your Spirit. We know that you live and reign together as one God. We pray all of this in his name. Amen.